Over the past 5 to 10 years, I have heard a lot of people say that some things just aren't as fun or as exciting anymore, that the world seems to be losing its colour and uniqueness. Once I heard people discussing this, it got me thinking whether they're right or not, as I myself couldn't decide if I agreed with them. Within this discussion, I'll be conducting research on if this statement is true, or if people are simply just stuck reminiscing about the past and refuse to accept how the world looks right now. Is the world getting boring, or are we just blinded by nostalgia? The first and one of the more common points people make when they're discussing this topic is about video games. Many people within the gamers Neo tribe have stated that the video games in the years of the 90s and the early 2000s looked much more vibrant and had a lot more life to them when compared to the games made within recent years. One of the reasons that these gamers have made this statement is because video games as a whole seem to be getting a lot less challenging within recent years. Tunch stated that games are not challenges but just distractions for the modern labourer, almost comparing that video games are more of an escape from reality now rather than a fun and exciting activity. He also states that video games are becoming much easier to access in recent years, with at least 30% of households in the US planning on buying at least one games console. Whereas during the 60s to the 80s, it was almost unheard of to even own a game console. Kids growing up in the newer generations are brought up playing video games, some playing games for the best part of their childhood. As time went on, game developers were able to find out what games best tailored to which type of person, and were also able to learn which games sold the best. And with that information, they were able to make the most money out of their games. Knowing this knowledge, I decided to conduct my own research to find out what genre of games sold the best over the past 40 years, from the years of 1980 to 2022. The 5 game genres I wanted to focus on are action, adventure, RPG, puzzle, and sport. I took the top 20 games of these decades and organised them by genre, and then made a pie chart displaying these statistics. I hypothesised that the amount of games per genre would reduce over the years, which would explain why people are bored of them. What you're seeing now are the pie charts. The first chart displays the information of 1980. As you can see, over 50% of the pie chart is being made up by the action genre, and only a quarter on top of that is added up by strategy. The next displays the statistics of the year 2000. This chart shows a slightly different turnaround, with a much larger portion of the pie chart being shared by the sports department, and just over a quarter being taken up by the action genre. Finally, taking a look at the year 2022, we can see a much more even distribution of the game genres. The adventure and RPG genres seem to be taking up almost a quarter each, with action games taking a similar percentage as the previous chart. Looking at the statistics in these charts, my hypothesis was completely wrong. In fact, the charts show the polar opposite of what I thought. Now knowing this has left me feeling much more confused than before as to why modern day gamers feel this way about video games. After this, I decided to look at what other gamers are saying on this topic by searching for chat discussions online. I found a discussion where a gamer asks why they find games boring as they get older, and there are a lot of mixed responses to this question. One of the more common reasons that these people have given is that a lot of gamers are simply just bored of the genre of game they engage with, and by switching up the games would result in these people being much happier with what they play. Another prominent reason that I have noticed is that a lot of modern day action games are very anger inducing to most of the gamers who play them. Games such as Fortnite and Call of Duty are competitive shooter games, and with competitive games come overly competitive players. A lot of gamers enjoy playing these games as they can be a fun challenge from time to time, but as time goes on, people have reported an increase of the amount of players who try very hard at these games in order to win, some even spending additional money to gain an unfair advantage. Pairing these factors together forces the more casual gamers to either try harder at these games or shovel money into the game to try and catch up the Neo tribe of gamers titled tryhards. Gamers having to focus on constantly improving their skills can cause them to get angry and upset with these games. As mentioned before, if these consumers try playing a different genre of game rather than sticking to what they always play with, may result them in finding their enjoyment once again. Speaking from personal experience, I can say that for a while I found that video games certainly felt a bit more boring than they used to when I was younger. I believe that part of this is to do with nostalgia blindness, but I also do agree that part of the issue simply lies with boredom of a specific game or genre. In recent years, I've decided to research different genres of games to which I find the most enjoyable. Some of the games that I find I enjoy the most are Ark Survival Evolved, Minecraft, Pokemon, Bomberman, and Garry's Mod. These games all share the genres of adventure or sandbox. I also decided to research the graphic style of the older games to see if I really was blinded by the nostalgic feeling of lower quality games. A lot of indie game developers upload games onto websites such as GameJolt or itch.io, with a PS2 style of graphics, usually being made of lower polygon models and a scratchier sound quality. This style of games are what I personally grew up on, therefore I believe that these games would trigger a nostalgic feeling for me, even if I've never played them before. To my surprise, these games didn't make me feel very nostalgic. I thought the graphic style was unique and reminded me of older times, but overall, I can't say that these games are very memorable, and I certainly won't be playing them over some more modern games such as Hogwarts Legacy. The final reason I found that confirms that video games are more boring than they used to be is that the majority of games created by big corporations such as Microsoft don't have much personality to them, and only serve as a simple cash grab. If we take the Skylanders series for example, the purpose of this game was to collect these toys-to-life characters to play in the games, with each character having its own unique abilities and looks. The first 3 games in this series were made together, each of these games bringing out new characters with unique abilities for you to use in-game. These games don't force you to buy the new characters though, as it allows you to play with the basic ones if the player wishes to. But with each new game, starting with Skylanders Trap Team, they brought out new characters that are needed in order to progress or even play the game. Each game becoming more about the developers earning money rather than a fun and interesting thing for gamers to enjoy. These sorts of things are becoming more and more noticeable in modern games with the normalization of microtransactions and the constant production of quickly made games that usually cost around £60 each. These factors are forcing the average gamer to consume more and more ludicrous products for something that they don't enjoy anymore is quite probably one of the biggest reasons they feel so unhappy and bored with modern video games now. The next topic I'll be discussing is how architecture and the world has changed over the years, and how this affects people's opinion on the question. People have been stating that modern buildings look horrible and soulless, whereas buildings from centuries ago looked elegant and beautiful, and this is what I will be researching within this segment. If we go ahead and take a look at Cardiff city centre, most of the buildings look somewhat the same, with the majority of the high-rise buildings being made up of white or beige concrete, or almost entirely made out of glass and metal. This sort of design in buildings seems to apply to most major cities across the world, with the majority of buildings being tall, reflective towers. This sort of pattern has been upsetting a lot of people, primarily when compared to what architecture looked like during the older centuries. A lot of towns and cities during the olden times, such as the 18th century, had a lot more shape and character to them, with a lot of buildings being accompanied with columns, statues and fountains. We can still see this style of architecture in modern locations, most famously in Rome. If we take the Trevi Fountain for example, we can see some of the most impressive forms of construction made by man, with beautifully carved statues and rocks paired with a huge fountain makes for an incredible sight with tens of thousands of people going to visit every day. If we compare this to the BBC building in our Cardiff city centre, it's very clear which looks more aesthetically pleasing to look at. Of course the BBC building is impressive and clearly took a lot of time and effort to build, but the basic black and grey colour palette paired with a simple rectangle shaped tower isn't pretty or enjoyable to look at to most people. I then decided to research as to why modern buildings look so bland and basic to see if there was a convincing reason behind it, and I found an article written by a licensed architect that shares his opinions on this. Thomas states that the outsides of most new buildings are dull, dreary and depressing. He discusses that the majority of the inside decorations with these buildings are often very pleasing to look at, but usually look quite boring on the outside. He makes a very valid point that most people would see the outsides of buildings while they're walking past, and much less of the insides. Therefore, it's quite strange that they look so displeasing. He also claims that there is scientific proof that these modern designs in architecture are taking a toll on our mental health as a society. There is now scientific evidence showing that the plain, flat, featureless buildings profoundly affect our mental health. Colin Ellard's 2012 study shows that the boring urban environments cause serious stress to people's brains and bodies. After discovering this information, it got me thinking as to why these buildings look this way. Mental health falls under the lower tiers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so this made very little sense to me. Therefore, I decided to conduct more research into why this is the case. After researching different factors while comparing the old buildings to the newer ones, there are a few pieces of information that I discovered. The first is that modern buildings are designed to be more cost effective and safe, as well as to be built within the shortest time possible. I discovered a YouTube video that calculated how much the Colosseum in Rome would cost if it were to be built with the same materials today, and would cost approximately $2 billion. This is a rough conversion of the Roman sesterti to modern American dollars. Modern day skyscrapers cost usually around $120 million to $1.2 billion, depending on the location and materials used. The main difference with these are that modern buildings are designed for utility and very often production, whereas the Colosseum was primarily used for entertainment. I believe it is fair to say that most architects wouldn't be willing to spend $2 billion simply on entertainment, especially if there is no revenue involved. Most would rather design and build something that is much more productive in order to help society more. I am lucky enough to say that I have seen some beautiful architecture with my own eyes. Having been to Italy to see some of the monuments such as the Trevi Fountain and the Vatican City is something I will remember for my life. because of how personal and soul-filled the buildings are. If we then compare the art of these older buildings to something like the nationwide headquarters in Northampton, it is quite saddening to see that this is becoming the default for what buildings are in society now. I understand that modern buildings are constructed more for productivity rather than aesthetic, but it would be much nicer if some of the buildings looked more unique rather than rows of tall, simple brutalist towers. After researching this segment, I believe that we are not blinded by nostalgia when it comes to how architecture is now. There is scientific proof that buildings look more pleasing in older times, and exterior looks are very rarely thought of when designing the modern buildings. The third segment of my discussion will be focusing more on media and technology over the past 2 decades. Much like my segment on video games, technology has been one of the leading points people make when claiming that the world is boring now, even though we are living in a more advanced age than ever when it comes to technology. During the early 1900s, the biggest inventions in technology were devices such as the invention of the car and the camera, which improved versions of these are seen almost everywhere in the modern day. Most things we want to do now are possible thanks to technology, even more so within the past year or two because of AI tools becoming more common. Even with these improvements in technology, people are still claiming that the world of technology and media is sad and boring. But why is this? I'm going to research how technology has changed over the years and see if there are any major reasons to why people believe this. During my childhood, access to the internet was starting to become very easy, only requiring a computer or laptop and a connection to the Wi-Fi. With this, a lot of people were beginning to create and upload their own websites and blog pages to the internet. Most of these websites were very colourful and abstract, having a very retro-futuristic style to them, often containing flashing images and moving GIFs. Another design style that was very common during my childhood was the Fruitager Aero style. This style consisted of high contrast colours, bubbles and water, often leaving the consumer of these styles of media feeling refreshed and rejuvenated at the sight of the bubbles and bright colours. After realising that these websites don't use either of these styles anymore, it got me asking myself why. Most modern websites and web pages adopt a very minimalist style, often only using simple shapes and pastel colours. While this style of design still very much looks good, it doesn't stand out nearly as much as most websites did during the early 90s and 2000s. I found an article written by a UX designer that discusses their experience with a drastic shift of design over the past 2 decades. In the beginning, WWW stood for Wild Wild Web. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason for many of the design choices back then. Rollins then goes on to discuss that websites didn't have a set design to them, but looked much more fun and exciting. The internet during this time was a new and exciting place, almost seeming like a magic portal to a new world. The internet was new and exciting. Hunting down a link among a sea of animated GIFs was part of the fun. The issue with this design of websites was that it was far from user-friendly. Adding to what Rollins previously stated, maneuvering these websites almost felt like a battle. It was inconvenient and difficult to get where you wanted to go. This is what sparked the change in UI design, especially with businesses. Modern websites look much more sleek and polished in order to guide the user where they need to be going. Some businesses try to design their websites to entice their consumer communities to their sites. If we take a look at Monster Energy, for example, they tailor towards both sports and gothic neo-tribes. And in order to appeal to these tribes, they've adopted a darker look and uploaded bike stunt videos to their website in order to appeal to their target audience as much as possible. During the earlier days of online media, the images and designs of these bright and colourful worlds were clearly enjoyed by many people, including myself. And it is relatively obvious as to why so many people would claim that the way media is designed now looks so much more soulless and boring, especially when compared to how fun and crazy the old style of websites looked. It almost came across as a promised future that was abandoned to make navigating these websites easier and more accessible for everyone. Personally, I would have loved to see these styles of websites be used in more modern designs, but it makes sense as to why it wasn't practical. The internet and technology as a whole has become a significant part of our lives, and it would make sense as to why that we as a society would need these to be more accessible for everyone. When it comes to media and modern technology, I believe that older technology certainly looked more fun and aesthetically pleasing, but modern adaptations were significantly more practical. Therefore, I don't believe that we are blinded by nostalgia when it comes to media and technology. I have conducted a series of research on 3 main topics that I discussed when asking whether the world is becoming more boring as time goes on. After completing the research, I have a very different view on the answer to this question than I initially had. The first segment on video games proved to be less of a blindness of nostalgia, but more of a discovery that a lot of gamers needed to simply broaden the genre of games that they play. The second segment about modern architecture also has proven that buildings do in fact look more boring and dull, but this factor is balanced out by the increased productivity and safety capabilities that these modern buildings are equipped with. Finally, the third segment about internet and technology was of a similar answer. The way older websites were designed had a certain charm to them that modern websites don't have. This is due to the increased use of technology over the years, and websites needing to become more accessible to everyone. Nevertheless, websites during the 90s and 2000s looked much more exciting than the simple designs we have now. Another common claim that people seem to make is that the world is losing its colour overall, with buildings, websites, movies and video games all becoming much less colourful now than they used to be. The main reason people believe this is due to a deterioration issue that our eyes go under over the course of our lives. This issue makes us slowly lose our sense of colour over our lives, which makes sense as to why people claim that the world is losing its colour. Only the world isn't losing the colour, our eyes are. After gathering all of my research and comparing the three main factors that people state when asked this question, it is clear that the world does in fact seem to be getting more boring as time goes on. This isn't necessarily a bad thing though, nor is it anyone's fault. If there are things that we don't like about the excitement in our lives, then for the most part, we can change it. In regards to how the world looks and functions, it does seem as if things are looking more bland, and unfortunately there isn't anything we can do about it, besides maybe appreciate what beauty there is still left in this world.